Whenever you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining. I'm Marlita Cruson, and we have a great group of us here to get to your questions soon this morning. I do want to remind you that on Monday, the city and subsequently St. Louis County put out the guidelines for reopening businesses. Let me say it in this way. We are cracking the door open, not swinging it wide open here, as we begin to allow restaurants and retail and offices to reopen on Monday, the 18th. So that is this coming Monday morning. There are a number of very, very helpful guidelines that you can find on the city's website, stlouis-mo.gov. It's right on the homepage. If you're looking for the guidelines for what you need to do in order to open your business. And there's so much good information there. Let me just say, for those requirements, thank you so much to all of the partners who helped pull those together. And of course, that includes Explore St. Louis, Kitty Ratcliffe, Brian Hall. It includes the Regional Chamber. Austin was in on that, as well as Otis, license collector. So there's a lot of good information there. And I know that you are all wanting to restart your business and do it in such a way that you don't get sick and that other folks don't get sick as well. I know you're also very interested today to hear more from the SBA and the other panelists that are here. So I'm going to just say welcome. Thank you all for joining in with us again, and appreciate the chance to visit with all of you. And I'm going to turn it over to License Collector Mavis Thompson.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for joining us today. This forum came, as the mayor already talked about, a collaboration of all of us. It's also an extension of the forums that the License Collector's Office that we conduct on hot topics. We've had numerous ones, namely MBE, WBE, DBE certification, merchants and manufacturing, tech innovation and venture capital, medical marijuana. And so again, we just want to bring these things to you to educate small businesses and help in any way that we possibly can. The License Collector's Office and SLDC, under the directorship of Otis Williams, we work diligently to put this thing together, like we said. And so the aim help facilitate the resources that are out there and available for small businesses. Now, you know that for some time, City Hall has been closed to the public, but the License Collector's Office, we continue to be available to you. And we would suggest that you email us any questions that you may have. lco@stlouis-mo.gov. And our staff, we're working on a skeleton crew, will answer and respond to you within a 24-hour period. And then for additional online for your license, you can renew online for your license, you can pay any fees that you may have, and also you can search for businesses online. So I welcome all of you today, and I will turn it over to now Otis. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam License Collector, and also thank you, Mayor. Again, today we want to share with you very good and cogent information about both the Small Business Administration and their programs, both the PPP and the EIDL, and the second wave that's gone out, and any update they might want to provide us. But also to have some discussions about the recently published public health order with the industry-specific guidelines. And so today we have with us several panel members, and I'm going to introduce them. First is Maureen Brinkley with the Regional Director for the Small Business Administration. And also from the Small Business Administration is Tom Dollar, who is the lead lender relations specialist with the Small Business Administration here locally. Also, Kevin Wilson, who is the Executive Director for the Small Business Empowerment Center. Actually, I always call it Small Business massive forms that help you get money through the SBA and other federal sources. The Austin Walker, who is the Vice President for Public Policy at the Regional Chamber. And so today also with us is Brian Hall, and I call Brian my superhero for working through all of the things that we've had to put together for the industry sector guidance that was there. But Brian is with Explore St. Louis and is communications director there. And so thank you all so much for joining us this morning. And so I'm going to go back and allow Maureen to provide any updates that might be available from the small business.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Otis, for inviting us again. I tell you, the last time we did this, Tom and I were overwhelmed with the very positive feedback that we got after the last webinar on Good Friday. This is the first time I get to say, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, and mean it. We hear that a lot, and it's that doesn't necessarily mean true if people don't believe. PPP was extremely successful. As you found out, it did so well, we ran out of money. We did 14 days of work, 14 equal to 14 years in 14 days. We were able to get more money for round two. The good news is that in round two, we've made more loans, and you know why? Because we were able to make smaller loans and get into the smaller communities, and that's what we have fought so hard. Really, really, really good news. And the reason I'm from the government, I'm here to help. We still have over $120 billion left in the funds, ready to make loans and grants, forgiven loans. Not only do we have it available, but we have a quick and easy application. So I'm gonna leave with that and hope we get more and more applications through our lenders. Thanks, Otis.
Okay, thank you. And Tom, I'm going to let Maureen speak to both the SBA, but I'm going to move to Kevin Wilson with the Small Business Empowerment Center.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Wilson. As mentioned, I'm with the Small Business Empowerment Center. We are part of the Small Business Development Center Network. We are partially funded by the SBA, and so work closely with Maureen and Tom on a lot of projects, as well as the St. Louis Development Corporation and Otis's team. So if there's anything we can do to provide assistance to you as a small business owner, whether that's small business coaching, helping you through an SBA application, things like that, or demystifying the process, don't hesitate to give us a call or reach out. So we're here to help and provide whatever services you need to grow a strong business and recover after this COVID-19 crisis. Thank you, Otis.
Kevin, can you give your contact information, please?
Absolutely. My email address is wilsonkr@stlouissbec.org. And my telephone number is 314-405-8400. Once again, that's 314-405-8400. And I'll put that in the chat box also.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to move to Brian Hall at the Explore St. Louis office. And so Brian, if you could.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me today. We've been working over the past several weeks with a number of industry experts in a series of industry segments that I'll cover in just a second, and public health officials in St. Louis City and County and members of the pandemic task force to uncover best practices in reference to how to reopen our businesses in a safe fashion. We've covered off sectors including hotels, retail, transportation, and restaurants. And we've been working hand in glove with both the mayor as well as Otis Williams at SLDC to ensure that these protocols are comprehensive, thoughtful, and safe. And all of this content is presently available, and I know we're going to be providing information in reference to where it can be found in just a minute.
Okay, move on to Austin Walker, who also assisted in this process.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the collaboration with certainly the city and CVC. Brian covered a bunch of groups about. They really are the ones that led the way on this. The chamber has covered business, office buildings, commercial office buildings in one working group, construction, manufacturing, repair. Another one, education is hair salons, daycare facilities, things like that.
Okay, so Austin, I'm going to ask maybe if your microphone might be adjusted just a bit so that we can get a clearer comments from you. But if you could just repeat the work groups that you led again.
All right, I'll step a little closer. We cover business, office buildings, commercial office buildings, construction, manufacturing, and repair, healthcare, education, and personal services.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so as both Austin and Brian commented, this was a true team effort, economic development community, both St. Louis City, St. Louis County, but also the public health offices for both the city and county, and the pandemic task force, the regional pandemic task force. And so all of the recommendations that you find at the link that, again, the mayor mentioned that to go to the city website and you will see it there. That will provide you with a lot of information about reopening, and that has links to the various industry sectors. You may find your business located in one of those sectors. So at this point, we appreciate you all joining us, but we are here to answer questions. And so the process would be that if you have a question, please move to the chat line, type your question in, and we will endeavor to get to all of them and answer your question online here. So JP, I have the first set of questions available. We can get started.
All right, thanks so much, Otis. First question. Is there any guidance for bars who take PPP who may be unable to reestablish their full workforce by June 30th? I believe that would be for SBA.
Tom, you want to answer that? You want me to do it?
Yeah, I don't mind answering. This is Tom Diber with the SBA. As far as the forgiveness guidance at this point in time, the general guidance has been issued that the PPP loan would be forgiven if at least 75% of the funds were used for payroll expenses within the 8-week period after the loan was advanced. We are getting a lot of questions as far as this one, as far as if the business was not able to be opened in that period, how that will be applied. And SBA is still working with Treasury on that guidance, and I would expect that to be out very shortly.
Yesterday, Secretary Mnuchin, who is really guiding this effort with SBA, was asked about the forgiveness portion and when and how this 8 weeks came about and if it can be extended. Like Tom said, as of now, the answers to both is no, it cannot. But the secretary did make an offer to the Senate and Congress that if they may want to look at that and then send that request over to him. Of course, it's going to be very difficult to spend and use that money in the 8-week period. But as is mentioned in the CFR, in order for a business to be eligible for the forgiveness, it must be spent within that 8-week period.
Good. Next question.
And so this, why isn't the collector of revenue a part of this? If a business owes the city money? How is the license collector and collector of revenue working with the business on payment plans? What if they cannot pay in 90 days due to the closures, additional expenses, and trying to reopen their businesses? What is being done to make it easy to do business in the city of St. Louis? I believe that would be for the license collector first.
Thank you. I can't speak for the collector of revenue, but I can tell you what our office is doing, and it's always done. When businesses cannot pay or file timely, because those are statutory guidelines, and do set up a payment plan. And so that's what we've always done, and we will continue to do throughout this pandemic.
And
If
go ahead, Mayor.
Well, I was just going to add to that what the license collector said, which is that the earnings tax return that was due on April the 15th is now not due until July the 15th. In concert with the IRS, they also extended theirs, as did the state of Missouri. So that is certainly an extension of 60 days, I guess. In addition to that, the collector of revenue, who collects most of the revenue, as the title says, for the city of, do have payment plans. And so in addition, you can pay online. So there are a lot of things. If you're having difficulty remitting some of your taxes, I know the collector of revenue will work with you on that.
Next question.
Thank you. All right, good morning. I just opened a new retail shop for vintage furniture, art, etc. in South City. I applied for disaster relief very early in the pandemic grant, which I was happy and grateful to get. I hadn't heard anything else for almost 2 months regarding any loans, but received yesterday an offer of a loan up to $6,800. As a very small business and single owner operator, it is very important to me to keep my credit score up, since any new vendors I'm looking to deal with will look. Any insight as to how these loans might affect sole proprietor credit wise? Will this SBA loan be looked at negatively? Thanks to you all. I think that's for SBA.
This is Tom Diver. I can try to answer that question. Glad you were able to get the disaster loan. We've got literally those out, so we are seeing those now coming forward. As far as the credit impact, I don't believe there'll be any negative impact on your credit score from receiving an SBA assistant loan. In fact, there's a coding available for that to be designated as related to a national disaster and emergency. So I think that will also help offset any negative impact of that on your credit score.
All right, next question. I'm a fairly large massage therapy business. I am concerned that hands-on businesses are included in the phase 1 reopening plan. We cannot distance, and massage means direct contact, extended exposure in a closed room. Also, the CDC has released a new symptom of COVID, even in symptomatic individuals, which is a new blood clot concern. Thrombosis, contradiction. I'm sorry, I believe that word may be misspelled. But thrombosis apparently is a symptom of a massage already. Due to all this, I would like massage therapy to be included in a later phase of reopening. And I am not happy to hear that massage was included in phase 1 reopening. I believe that would be from Mayor Cruzen.
Thank you for that question. So a couple of things. Hopefully you've taken a look at the guidelines that have been put out for what's categorized as personal services, because there are a lot of good guidelines should you choose to open. One of the things about this cracking the door open a bit is that we want folks to go slow. So just because you can reopen does not mean that you need to reopen. And so if you either are not comfortable reopening, or if you don't have the right PPE to reopen, I would say you may not want to reopen. So there's no requirement that you do so. There are a lot of businesses, restaurants, retail shops, offices who are not reopening on Monday. So I think that's really, as a business owner, you get to make that decision.
All right, next question. Will the SBA be modifying any of their lending practices to make financing for acquisitions and mergers more appealing or easier to obtain?
This is Tom Diber with the SBA. I can answer that question. The PPP program originally did not allow for loans to be made to businesses that started or where there was a change of ownership after the February 15th start date. We heard questions on that, and actually SBA did change those rules. So if you acquire a business after February 15th and you retain those employees that were in place before the acquisition, then you would be eligible for a PPP loan. In addition to that, the PPP loan is primarily paycheck protection. So the use of the proceeds is primarily for maintaining payroll. But SBA does, on the General 7A program, finance many acquisitions and mergers. So those loan funds are available currently and will continue to be available after the pandemic passes.
And again, this is Maureen again. Let me add again to what Tom said. The most important thing to remember about PPP is that 75% must be for payroll. Imagine that's why we were trying to keep unemployment down and help people get back to work. As far as the changes to the regs, I cannot emphasize enough to you how often the regs are changed every day as we get feedback such as this throughout the country. Our Office of Capital Access works diligently to look at feedback, and the changes are made to assist affiliations, mergers, all types of different additional requests that have come in. So my recommendation is to go to the SBA website and/or the Treasury website and look at the frequently asked questions. They change every day. Thank you.
All right, next question. What is the city doing for minority businesses? I believe that is for you, Otis.
Sure. So what we're trying to do is to reach out and have conversations with all businesses, to include minority businesses. And so Daphne Moore on our staff, as well as Vladimir Monroe, and we've also enlisted the help of Kevin Wilson to help us reach out. But if there is a minority business online and have a specific request or an answer that they're seeking, please reach out to us directly, and you can get me through my email, which is williamsot, WILLIAMSOT @stlouis-mo.gov. So I think you can go to the SLDC website and you'll find my contact information there as well. But let us know what your needs are, and hopefully we'll be able to assist you. So a couple of things, though, specifically that we're looking at is creating new loan programs that we are working with the EDA and with our local development company to try and create those loans. But at some point, we will be working directly with some of the neighborhood organizations as well. So the key here is to interact with the MNWBE community to see how we might be able to help. So if you have a request or have some idea, be sure and share it with us.
Well, thanks, Otis. All right, next question. Are we committed to classifying boutique studios such as yoga with gyms and fitness centers, or can we move to make them in line with services? I believe that's for you, Mayor.
Thank you. That's an interesting question. Right now, as you probably know, gyms are closed because of the equipment. Generally, yoga studios have been considered probably a form of exercise. We all know that it's also a form of meditation and a number of other things. So that's not something that we have been thinking about at this point in time, but it could be. I think the other thing would be whether or not the yoga studio, what sort of equipment you might have. It might be something, I invited people the other day, it might be something that you might want to submit to us, what sort of requirements you think should be imposed on a yoga studio if that is your business, because you certainly know it better than we do. And you might take a look at those guidelines that are under the personal services section and the CDC guidelines.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Next question. If we applied for PPP in the first round and were not awarded, do we need to reapply? That's for SBA.
I'm Diber with the SBA. Your loan would not automatically be reconsidered, but the loan applications are filed with your lender, so your bank or credit union. I know some that were, because of the volume, they kept those automatically and resubmitted those with the second round, but that would be something to check with your lender to see if they submitted that on your behalf. If they did not submit that, then you could apply again for the second round funding.
Thanks, Tom. You mentioned phase 1 has salons reopening, but you said spas are not in phase 2. Does that include aestheticians? There are very little guidance on aesthetic services. How do you propose performing facial services? I think that's for the mayor.
Thank you. If you haven't already, please do look at the personal services, which estheticians would be a personal service, similar to massage, similar to hair services. And there are many, many guidelines in here, and I that talk about what are the workplace best practices, what your employees have to do, what your customers have to do. Of course, you have to wear a mask. Both you and the customer have to wear a mask. There have to be extensive cleaning procedures. All of that you can find on the website under the personal services tab. And then I guess the last thing to reiterate here is that you don't have to open. There is no requirement at all for you to reopen your business, your personal services business. Esthetician, whether that's a facial, whether it's eyebrows, whether it's massages, hair care, all of that. So you don't have to reopen.
So at this point, I believe Austin Walker, you led this industry sector. Anything to add to that? Sorry, maybe we lost Austin. Okay, go to the next question.
All right, thanks, Otis. Do you qualify if your business has been operating for less than a year, specifically 9 months with 3 contractors? I believe that's for SBA.
Yeah, so the SBA program is available to any business that was in operation on February 15th, since the program is available to help those who were impacted by the natural disaster. And also ask any questions about contractors. 1099 folks are not employees, they're independent contractors. So the business would not be able to claim payroll for people who were not on their payroll through W-2 wages. But the independent contractors are self-employed individuals, and they would be able to apply themselves for a PPP loan.
All right, next question. Are 501c6 trade associations eligible for a forgivable loan program through SBA for salaries? It is my understanding that 501c6 organizations are not eligible for PPP at this time. Back to you, Tom.
Yeah, that is correct. At this point in time, as Maureen said earlier, the guidance is changing literally every day. But at this moment, 501c3 organizations are eligible for PPP, but 501c6s are currently not available.
They are being looked at, those C6 and C7 as we speak. They are looking at those, but as of now, the answer is no.
And this is Austin with Chamber. The Chamber is actually a C6 organization, and a lot of chambers are. And we've been concerned about it. There's a bill right now in Congress that will probably do something that does correct it. But folks are right. There's nothing right now.
Right.
Great, next question. Regarding the 75% payroll cost, is that affected by number of employees? Example, if you had 10 employees before who made $50,000 a year, I'm assuming, and now during the 8 weeks have 5 employees who make $100,000 each, The payroll cost would be at least 75%, but number of employees would be less during the 8-week period. That's for SBA.
We don't have the forgiveness guidance yet. As Maureen mentioned earlier, the Treasury Secretary is working with SBA on providing that guidance, and I expect that to be out shortly. In the original rules, there was mention that the FTE count would have to be maintained as well. So I think the spirit was that you maintained the number of employees as well as their salary. So again, I would think that the goal is to maintain the head count as well as the salary counts, but we'll have further guidance on that here shortly.
Yeah, and I think the question is why such a over 100% increase in salary to lesser employees. So that's something that would really have to be looked at later on.
All right, next question. What's the status of business licenses due June 2020? Madam License Collector.
I guess if I can read more into the question, I think that I would give the same answer that I gave last time. Per state statute as well as city ordinances, there is a filing deadline and there is also a payment deadline. I don't have the authority to overrule any of the deadlines or extend them. But as previously mentioned, what we've always done here at the License Collector's Office is go by a case-by-case basis, look at the situation, and we work with those businesses that are late filing and or late paying. And so that's the best answer that I can give. The deadlines are still the same, but we'll work with the individual businesses on a case-by-case basis to set up a payment plan.
Thank you, Madam License Collector. I saw that EIDL is only taking agricultural applications now. Do you expect that to be the standard going forward? And that is for the SBA.
I'll take that one, Tom. I'm a very transparent person, and my own personal opinion, I do not expect that to change. And I'll tell you why. We are currently still in the mode of dispersing EIDL loans from round one, from the initial stimulus package. Until we have finished doing that. See, unlike the PPP, which is handled through the lenders, it was a lot easier getting through those applications because through lenders and fintechs, we were able to process those applications, get the money out quickly. EIDL is a little different. They're handled through a call center. A lot of the applications were mail-ins. Customer service has been backlogged, and it is unbelievable the volume of loans that still have not been dispersed. So until the agency gets to the point that we have fulfilled all those applications and funded all of those EIDL loans previously, I don't suspect that that will change soon. In addition, we are obligated to help as many agribusinesses as we possibly can. So for right now, I don't see that opening quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Can you reconsider small private gyms opening with a smaller occupancy? 15 to 20% of the occupancy gives plenty enough space. Just like hospitals, we are at the front line of fighting heart disease and obesity. That's for the mayor.
Thank you for that question. Gyms, both small gyms, big gyms, gyms that are in apartment complexes, gyms that are in hotels. Right now, they are all closed. I do see that, and hopefully in the next few weeks that may change, but it will change with a number of regulations. When you have a gym, you know that there's, a lot of people breathing heavily, which disperses the possibility of COVID exposure. You also have equipment that's being used, which the virus can live on that equipment for some time. And so that's part of the concern about opening gyms. Now, I don't know, small gyms versus big gyms. That would be a nuance that you know, it'd be interesting if there is an association for gyms that perhaps you might want to think about submitting some suggestions as a group that we could help work through with that. And Austin, I know that you worked on the personal services. This doesn't fall under personal services at this point in time, but I don't know if you had any additional information that you gained from that.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. We actually did end up talking about this during our working group. We had several gyms represented here in St. Louis. They're thinking creatively and doing a number of different things to try to open as early as they can, as safe as they can. And one of those things is closing down every other piece of cardio equipment to ensure that they're maintaining 6 feet of social distancing necessary, and making sure that folks are wiping down equipment before and after. Also looking into the kind of sanitizers that they're using in compliance with CDC guidelines. So there's a number of resources that are available for that, but running this stuff through the infectious disease experts, it's pretty clear that the principles of the disease transmission are going to have to be adhered to, and that's the social distancing, the sanitization of all equipment and tools, and maintaining proper occupancy to create a safe environment. We will explore further, by the way. These working groups, will continue, and we'll continue to have these conversations until everything's reopened.
Thanks, Austin. With regards to PPP, if employees received unemployment during the time before the business received PPP and the business reopens, what do we do about employees that do not want to return? Does their unemployment end? Can I hire others? How should it be handled by small business owners? I believe that's for SBA.
Yeah, as far as the unemployment, obviously you cannot, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe you cannot collect unemployment while you're working. So you have to make a choice. The employees have to make a choice if they're going to come back to work or not. One of the rules that SBA did change was that if employees chose not to come back to work, the business can document in writing that the job was offered and the employee refused, and then that will not count against the forgiveness. And obviously a business can hire new employees and use those new dollars to count toward the forgiveness.
Not only can, they should rehire in those positions. But the key is to have documentation that you offered the position back to the employee and they denied it. But keep in mind, employment is kind of a nice salary right now. So we're seeing that a lot, that employees choose not to come back to work. They want to receive unemployment. But keep in mind, the reason for the PPP was to keep unemployment down and help us to keep small businesses hiring who want to keep their employees on board.
I just would like to add as well that you have to make sure that work is available. And so that's part of the documentation too, that you have to make sure that work is available and the employee refused that work.
Well, for us, it's re-employing keeping the employment in the same job they had as of February the 15th. So that's our ruling.
Thanks, everybody. How is the St. Louis Regional Chamber and Explore St. Louis ensuring a diverse group of stakeholders are participating in the reopening working groups? Brian and Austin?
Happy to answer that. We expressly reached out to a cross-section of individuals when we were populating the working groups, and it's extraordinarily diverse. And moving forward, if anyone has interest in being part of our working groups, we'd be delighted to have you as part of the virtual sessions that we continue to conduct. You can just reach out to me at bhall@Explore St. Louis if you have interest in any of the 5 segments that Explore St. Louis is involved in.
Yeah, and I'd put that out to everybody as well. For the Regional Chamber, diversity inclusion is one of our top priorities, and that's not just about race and gender. It's about reaching across different industries and geography as well. The region's not just St. Louis City and county. It's a 15 county metro region that we care about. And so we definitely want to include our partners over in Metro East as well. So please reach out if you want to be a part of any of our working groups, awalker@stlregionalchamber.com.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Has there been any decisions or discussions about how unemployment benefits will be continued or discontinued for employees who feel unsafe coming back to work? I believe that would be Mayor and SBA.
So I'm not an expert on unemployment, but unemployment doesn't last forever. At least right now, it lasts, I believe, until July 22nd if you are if you have lost your job. So unemployment with the about $300 a week from Missouri and $600 a week from the federal government, that's $900 a week. I understand that there are folks who would who are uncomfortable coming back to work, who would prefer to be able to stay home for the $900 a week. But I think what you want to think about is whether or not how that's going to work out after July 22nd, if in fact the federal additional amount goes away. The other thing is that normally when you're on unemployment, you do have to be seeking work. I think that's not the case right now, but I'm sure that folks will go back to that at some point in time. Maybe the SBA has more information on that.
Well, like I said, on unemployment, I don't have any, no, I have no suggestions as far as unemployment is concerned. No, I don't.
Let me jump in and just say that the State Department of Labor office has had a number of sessions. In effect, if you go to the State of Missouri Department of Labor, you will be able to get a frequently asked questions, and some of the questions that have been asked about unemployment are some of those that were on that frequently asked questions list. So I would encourage folks to go to the State of Missouri Department of Labor and see the frequently asked questions section there.
Right, next question. My gym of 11 years closed March 23rd. Bank said I wasn't eligible for PPP and EIDL hasn't been available. Unemployment turned me down. I received no funding assistance, so I'm a bit frantic. I'm the only employee, but haven't been paying myself so I could pay towards business debt. Am I eligible for anything to keep my business alive? I believe that's for
With the SBA, as far as the PPP portion, I'm not sure the timing as far as when you applied. You mentioned March 23rd. The funds weren't available for sole proprietor, self-employed individuals until April 10th. So that may impact. So you may want to talk to your lender about whether you're eligible for the PPP under the current program. The other thing that SBA is doing that hasn't gotten as much press is that SBA is making 6 months of loan payments on any SBA guaranteed loan. So if you have an existing SBA loan, SBA is subsidizing those payments and actually making the payments for those businesses for 6 months.
In addition, if you are a city-based business and you have documentation that is a tax return and seeking a loan, you can reach out to our local development company, and we can have a discussion about maybe a loan that a very low interest loan that might be able to tide you through. And I'm not sure if you also applied for the zero interest loan program, but if you did, we'd be happy to have that discussion too, because we've gone through that program and exhausted the funds, but we would like to talk to anyone who still is in need about some other potential low interest loan.
All right, next question. I believe actually this is more of a statement for the business working group. Please do not categorize all gyms the same. Small private gyms, business model is quality over quantity. We only service around 50 people a day. I did believe you said, Austin, you guys have been having discussions about this.
We've been talking about gyms, both large and small, and recognizing that there are going to be some differences there, certainly, in the square footage and the amount of equipment and the spacing of that equipment. Although there are some commonalities across all of that, including the social distancing requirements, the sanitization that has to happen. So we have been talking about that specifically.
Great. Next question. This is a bit tricky because it deals with unemployment again, so you might have to address this, Otis. Will you reconsider pushing hair salons to a later reopening phase? We are high risk, and other states have salons in phase 3 or later. We are in direct contact for extended periods of time with multiple people per day. If we choose not to reopen, are workers still eligible for unemployment? Please be clear.
Well, I think that goes to the answer that the mayor has given previously, I think, is that not everyone is required to reopen. And so the fact that it is allowed in a certain phase does not mean that the business would have to reopen. I think this is about everyone feeling comfortable and being able to work in an environment that they are comfortable with. So I think that would be the response that I would give to that.
Thanks, Otis. All right, next question. What has been the biggest hesitation for business owners in requirements for reopening? I believe that may be for the working group, if you wanted to tackle that one, Austin.
Well,
Sure. I mean, I think one of the
go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think one of the biggest things on our end that we've been hearing from businesses is the liability issue. They're asking a lot of questions, about whether things are mandated, whether they have to have certain things for their folks, face masks, things like that, whether they'll be, liable on the back end for any of this stuff if someone ends up getting infected. So those are concerns that we're looking at. There's legislation in Congress that's being considered in the 4th phase that could correct some of that. But that would be top of mind, I think, from the chamber.
One of the aspects that I've heard from several restaurateurs is whether or not, given the fact that they would have to substantially reduce their capacity to maintain the distancing requirements outlined in the protocols, doesn't make sense for them to reopen. And the answer to that question is it may not. But if it does, one of the things that we would encourage restaurants to consider is actually expanding their outdoor space, so that while they can't have the same capacity that they once were able to maintain inside, they have the opportunity for outside dining, and we'd strongly encourage that.
I would just add real quick, also the obvious concern that I think a lot of businesses are facing is how do we do this safely? And at the chamber, we do have a small committee, and I would maybe suggest that other organizations do the same thing if you haven't, to really discuss reopening, what that looks like, involving folks that might have conditions that would make them more vulnerable to COVID-19, folks that may or may not be pregnant, things like that. I think people should be at least having that conversation about how we do this safely.
All righty, thank you. Next question. We have another good morning. I am in the wedding industry. Do you have any advice for all of us service event-based businesses in advising our clients? Excuse me. I believe the question has disappeared, unfortunately. Well, the question had dealt with what do you tell folks who coordinates with multiple venues, particularly photographers and folks in service industries, about guidance moving forward?
The venue category is presently not able to reopen for any activity that would be associated or include more than 10 people. So the overall advice in reference to service providers right now that would be working with different venues throughout the community is that, as I understand it, the mayor is looking at venues being able to open in a future phase, and hopefully that's not in the too distant future.
Thank you. Next question. Why would St. Louis City continue to be heavy-handed with bureaucratic red tape? Compare your plans to other Midwest cities like Indianapolis. Small business owners, restaurants especially, have thin margins, and you have laid out so many requirements that it takes a full-time employee just to make sure they jump through all of your hoops.
I guess maybe I'll try and address that just momentarily, and I'll ask maybe Brian and Austin to jump in. But I think what we did was to work with the industry, with folks who are working in the various industry groups that, for instance, for restaurants or even for hotels. But we tried to get people who were working there, and we wanted to be sure that we were giving clear guidelines. And most, while it may be a lot of information, I think it is helpful information that many folks would have questions about, otherwise. And so I think it was the idea of trying to be as helpful as possible, but also at the same time trying to ensure that we had a safe environment for both the employees as well as the constituents that were using the service. And so I think that was the basis for what we were trying to do. And actually, I'm not sure that we are that far from what other cities have provided if you read all of the annexes that you see. So if you compare Nashville and others, so I think you can find a variation of and degree of complexity in these reopening guidelines. I think what we were trying to do is to be to work with the various groups and try and provide them with information they were needing. So Brian.
Yeah, I mean, we actually consulted a number of leading sources in addition to experts, and our guidelines are very consistent with what organizations, restaurant and food service organizations, quite literally around the world, are embracing right now. So where other municipalities and states may have more lax requirements, I would argue that that ours are very thoughtful. They certainly do not intend to offer obstacles. Rather, as Otis just said, they intend to permit restaurants to open in a responsible and safe fashion.
And I think this is part of the good thing about these working groups. These are business-led working groups, and the folks that are on our committees aren't inclined to wanting to be regulated to the point where they can't operate or they're losing revenue. To the contrary, they're itching to get in the game again, and we got folks that want to put food on the table, and that's really important. So at the same time, it's business driven. We certainly have infectious disease experts that are able to help us make sure that we do that safely. But the goal is to create as few regulations or guidelines, if you will, as possible while maintaining a safe environment.
Great, thanks so much. Next question. I am an STL startup company seeking loan or grant funding to continue operating and hire staff to work on projects already in progress. Can we apply for assistance from SBDC, and how do I apply? Kevin, I think this is for you.
So in terms of the services of the Small Business Development Center, all you have to do is reach out to us. Our services are free and happy to help anybody through any kind of applications or anything like that. Once again, just reach out to me. My email address is wilsonkr@stlewisSBEC.org, and we're happy to take care of any kind of questions you might have.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Next question. Are there any new pieces of legislation or bills being proposed or passed in St. Louis or Missouri to allow business insurance companies to pay business interruption claims? Mayor, I believe that's for you.
So actually, that would be for the state legislature, which you probably know is in session right now. I know there has been some discussion. It's my understanding that most businesses who had business interruption insurance that would normally pay when your business was, quote, interrupted, those policies, many of them are not paying because there's a specific inclusion in there or exclusion in there for a pandemic. And so the state Missouri Insurance Commission is taking a look at that, as well as the state legislature. I don't know if the state legislature will move very quickly on that or not. I would doubt that they will, unfortunately. But I know that that has been just a continuing issue with regard to business interruption insurance. I also think that's part of the reason that the federal government has put the programs in place that they have put in place, the PPP, the small business loans, et cetera, in order to help businesses, recognizing that the private insurance market is denying most of those claims.
Thank you, Mayor. Next question. What can you use the PPP loan funds for after the 8-week forgiveness period? Do the funds still need to be used on eligible expenses, such as payroll, rent, utilities, interest, or can the funds be used for other business expenses? SBA, Tom?
Yes, the funds still need to be used for eligible expenses. The availability of the funds were based upon the amount of payroll. There is an allowance to use that toward rent, utilities, and interest, so you can still use your funds after the 8 weeks for those eligible expenses. But obviously, if it's beyond the 8 weeks at this point in time, based on current guidance, that portion alone would not be forgiven.
And let's keep in mind, PPP means Payroll Protection Program. So I repeat, the reason for this initiative by the president was to protect the payroll of the individuals so that you could continue to have them hired and on board. So, and the purpose of forgiveness was because there was an urgent need for small businesses to have and use and keep that money. It cannot, after the 8-week period, it turns into a loan and it will not be forgiven. But having said that, the loan is at a very low interest rate. That loan portion will be at 1%, right, Tom?
That is correct, 1%.
Thank you. Next question. Has the city considered closing certain streets to vehicular traffic in order to create more space for restaurants and retail businesses to abide by social distancing guidelines by utilizing the closed sections for dining and retail needs? I believe that is for you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, if you like, maybe I can address that. But yes, the question is that, I mean, the answer is that we have been having those discussions on the staff level, and I'll let the mayor interject as well. But there have been a number of discussions to talk about how to expand to open spaces to adjacent businesses, and particularly if there was private property, but also on streets. And so that discussion is ongoing. We have had an agreement on how and what forms to provide for expanding onto private property, and that is parking lots and adjacent property. And you can contact Travis Hauser at Special Events Office for that. And I believe that number is 589-1539. Travis would be happy to have conversation with you about that. So we're working through that. As far as the streets, that is another topic, and so we would like to do that, but we have to do that responsibly, and that is a process. And so folks are having discussions about how to do that right at the moment.
Thanks, Otis. Next question. Will you be helping business owners secure hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes to meet their needs? These items can be difficult to secure.
So I'd be glad to take that question. Two things. If I could first go back to the prior question about, are we considering closing streets? We've had this conversation with the aldermen, and I think that really the aldermen and the neighborhood groups need to come together and make a specific proposal. That's what I had asked them to do, because I don't think we're the best equipped here in room 200 to decide, oh, well, we should close Market Street or Cherokee Street or Euclid. But those business groups should come together, make a proposal about how they see it working. Of course, it's going to take up some parking. You want to make sure you have the support of the neighborhood before you do that. And when that happens, and I don't think we have any specific proposals, but when we do, we will work through the red tape and get to the answer on that very quickly if we have the support of the aldermen and the neighborhood groups to try something out. I would suggest, let's try out a half a block or a block or something like that first before we, close the entire street. But we're very happy to work through that, because we know that being able to dine outdoors is a plus, especially, if it ever warms up, and also a little bit safer situation with regard to the spread of COVID. The one thing it can't do is it can't turn into a street party. You would still have to have tables 6 feet apart. You would still have to be physically distant from one another, et cetera. Now, on to the second question, what was the second question?
PPE, Mayor.
Oh, PPE, yes. That was my cue. So any small business, 10 employees or under, can go on our website and go to our Twitter page or Facebook page and sign up to get a packet of PPE. So that we start distributing those actually tomorrow. You get 20 face masks, 20 gloves, information so that you can get started for, if you're a 2-person business, a 3-person business, 7, 8, 9. So yes, we are giving that out to business. And there are 3 sites where you can pick up a packet once you've registered for it online.
Thanks, Mayor. All right, next question. What about churches exactly? I believe that's back to you, Mayor.
So what about churches exactly? So we have had a number of conversations with the Clergy Coalition, with the Archdiocese, with a number of churches. Churches need to follow the CDC guidelines, and they are pretty extensive. So for example, if you're in, churches will be able to open on the 18th. You will have to be socially distanced. So I'll give an example. One family, a husband and wife, or or wife and kids, or whoever it is, can sit at one end of the pew together because they live in the same household. The pew behind them would be vacant. Nobody would sit there. Maybe one other person could sit 6 feet away on the pew. So those are all some of the things that churches are having to consider. Also, sometimes in church, you will turn around and shake hands with people, give them hugs. That needs to be ceased. So it really is a matter of being able to be physically distant from one another by at least 6 feet, and you need to wear a mask in church. Anywhere really. If you're outside and it's unpredictable as to whether or not you're going to be able to stay 6 feet away from people, you really should be wearing a mask. Doesn't have to be. Can be here's one I've been wearing today. It's just a little cloth mask. I've got a variety of them here. It can be a bandana. It can be a mask that you make out of an old t-shirt. You go online. There are lots of options for that, but you should wear a mask to protect yourself and to protect other people.
All right, thanks, man. Got another one for you. How long do you estimate phase 1 will last?
We don't know the answer to that. I wish that we did. We're going to continue to watch the cases and continue to watch hospitalizations, which is a very important function here. We are seeing and have seen the number of hospitalizations go down and the severity of those hospitalizations go down. So that's very important to us because that's the one true thing. Someone is in the hospital for COVID, it's very clear. So I expect, and this is, it's going to be a few weeks. There's no set date because we have to watch and see what happens.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And notice we have a question concerning contact information. There's a Pilates studio owner in the city that would like to know who to contact to list their policies of why they would be similar to massage and physical therapy personal services.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said, JP.
Sure, I'll repeat. There's a Pilates studio owner in the city who would like to know who to contact to list their policies of why they would be considered similar to massage and physical therapy personal services.
I might take that question. That's Pilates being similar to yoga, similar to the question we had earlier. There's an email address that we are compiling a list of frequently asked questions, and it's restart, STLOUIS, restart St. Louis at our email address, stlouis-mo.gov. So if you want to go online, you can get a link to that or just email us those questions so that we can take them up. Really, these decisions are being made by medical doctors, not by politicians or bureaucrats. So we'll take that up with the St. Louis Metropolitan Pandemic Task Force, as well as Dr. Eccles, who heads up our health department here in the city of St. Louis. And we'll include St. Louis County in that as well, because we're trying very hard not to have one set of rules in the city and a different set of rules in the county. So we'll all come together on that. Restart St. Louis at stlouis-mo.gov.
Thank you, Mayor. Sifting through some of these questions that were similar from before. All right, here's another. Can you speak to any additional assistance for child care centers? We rely heavily on tuition and plan a phased reopening June 1st. We've applied for PPP with no answer yet. I'm worried about being able to open with less tuition coming in and all of the usual bills. Child care is essential for families getting back to work. Thank you.
So childcare is essential for families getting back to work. Childcare centers have to follow the CDC guidelines, which are really good and quite extensive. If you're a childcare center with fewer than 10 employees, just sign up. We'll get you the first 20 masks and some gloves. But you actually take a look at those CDC guidelines because, in order to care for kids and have infection control and have some distance, that's a challenging situation. So take a look at that. But of course, we can help you with PPP, PPE, sorry, too many initials, personal protective equipment.
Righty. Continue to sift through some of the questions. And Austin, we have one for you. On Austin Walker's subcommittees, were there minority businesses involved with giving feedback and sitting on committees, since these businesses may operate differently?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. And if you want to submit information, please email the chamber, me specifically, walker@stlregionalchamber.com, or all hands on deck thing, and we'd like any information that we can, so that'd be helpful.
Great. And then we have another one here for the mayor. Why are hair salons considered to be in phase 1?
Hair salon doesn't need to reopen. You can reopen if you feel that you can follow the guidelines that are set out both by the state as well as the in the section for personal services, but you're not required to open. And I know a number of stylists who are not opening on May 18th, so you don't have to reopen.
Another one for the mayor. A lot of community-based organizations are having food giveaways. How is the city ensuring that volunteers are staying 6 feet apart? It's this dangerous to the community.
So I participated in one of those food giveaways just on this past Saturday, 3 days ago. All the volunteers were wearing masks and were generally 6 feet apart. But both of those things together are very important. We also were giving out masks there for folks who don't have them. We're going to figure out how to coexist with COVID. And that's what we're all trying to do right now, is to figure out how to coexist with COVID. It's likely, from what I read, that there won't be a vaccine for COVID maybe for another year. We just don't know the answer to that. But I think that, if you're a little older, if you have any underlying health condition, you really should seriously consider staying at home. Now, that's a decision that you will have to make, but you don't want to put yourself in a position where you are exposed to a lot of people and increase your chances of getting COVID. So food giveaways, volunteers have to wear masks, have to try to stay 6 feet apart, and so do the folks that are the clients or the customers that are coming there.
Got another one for you, Mayor. Will another round of free PPE be provided to city small businesses after the distribution dates this week and next Monday? A number of city businesses are hesitant to open on May 18th, but have plans to open at a later date and will still need masks at that time.
So even if you're going to open in another week or 2 weeks, you can get the PPE right now. You can get the masks and the gloves right now. And that should give you some time to order your own masks and gloves. This is kind of a starter pack, not something that's intended to take you through the next year. And I know that PPE is one of those things that you can use loans or grants for, that you're able to get either from SBA or from, there were some grants given out by SLDC, and there are other programs available. So this is a starter pack. Go get one now, even if you are not going to open for 2 weeks.
Thanks, Mayor. If we choose not to reopen due to being a direct contact business type, your answer of, quote, you don't have to reopen, end quote, is based on the idea that any of us can afford to just be out of work. We can, quote, choose to not open all we want, but as soon as we're technically allowed to reopen, all support programs will go away. Can the gentleman who was part of the personal services section speak more about this? And yes, I read the guidelines thoroughly. I want to say thank you to the SBA.
Brian, I was unable to hear the last part of that call or that question. Were you able to hear that?
Sorry, the last part, Austin, was can the gentleman who was part of the personal services section speak more about this? And they thanked the SBA after that.
SBA thanks you back.
Absolutely.
I just hear the first part of the question. I'm sorry, the audio cut out.
Sorry, Austin. This individual wants to know, can you speak more to folks not choosing to open up, but soon as they do open up, the support programs go away?
Yeah, I mean, so there might be some support programs that could go away. We're going to do everything that we can to make sure that businesses are supported. I mean, that's what the regional chamber's for, to make sure that we're constantly figuring out new ways to support our businesses. So, participation in these working groups ongoing, that's going to be important, and engagement in public policy. The regional chamber is going to be important as we, do this the rest of the year, right? We're going to be paying attention to Congress. We're going to be paying attention to both legislatures, what government's doing, and we're going to be working with our economic department partners being supportive.
I think also.
Yeah, go ahead, Otis.
No, go ahead, Mayor. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that the support programs don't go away if you don't reopen. At least that's certainly my understanding. Now, of course, if you got a PPP loan, and the SBA can speak to this, it needs to be paid to people for their salaries. But if the folks are laid off and their business does not reopen, they don't have a job to go back to. So they would still, if that business is not reopened, be eligible for their unemployment, is my understanding. I think that's something we all need to get firmly. I have looked on the Department of Labor's website. I don't see that direct question. And it's the way it actually is.
And Mayor, I was going to suggest that I see on the chat line there are a number of questions as related to that. We will reach out to the Department of Labor, get that answer, and get it posted again on for everyone. Just to confirm, if the order is that you can open but you choose not to, how does that impact unemployment? Okay, so the unemployment benefits. So we will double check that and make sure everyone gets the answer.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple more questions here before time runs out. All right. Is there any guidance for employees whose employers are planning on reopening without implementing physical distancing and safety precautions? Is there any protections for employees that feel unsafe or that their place of employment is unsafe? Example, bars opening without limiting the guest count. The mayor had mentioned talking to the employer, but if that has been done, what are the next steps that an employee can take? Do employees have any legal rights to protect themselves and the community?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that question originally.
I can repeat it.
If you, go ahead.
All right. I'm sorry, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Here, but they wanted to know if there were guidance for employees who feel as though their employers are opening back their establishment without implementing the physical safety precautions. And they want to know what protections do they have to protect themselves against employers who may reopen without implementing the guidelines.
Thank you for that question. And we get that question a lot. I recommend two things. One, if you feel that your employer is not following the guidance and the standards, in other words, you're not doing social distancing, you don't have PPE. If you feel that that is the case, the first thing I would do is go to my employer. If you don't want to do that, or you're not comfortable doing that, then you can report to the health department, which is 657-1499. And the health department will look into and investigate whether or not that business is following the proper guidelines or not.
Thanks, Mayor.
And Mayor, if I could add just a little bit to that, and that is that not only do we want employees to have these expectations, but we want patrons to have these expectations, to make them informed customers, so that when you go to your favorite retail establishment, or you go to your favorite restaurant, you should expect that these protocols are going to be adhered to. And if they're not, we don't recommend that you patronize those businesses.
Great point, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. And next question. A lot of minority businesses will not open back up. Are you willing to fund a recovery center for minority businesses like FEMA does for disaster relief? These centers need to be funded by the city and in every local community. What else are you guys?
Okay, I think we are looking at all options here, and so what our limitations will be is funding and available funding, and so we see we know what's in the current CARES Act, and we'll see what comes down. But we have been looking at, particularly in the city, something like a grant program that we could use to help small businesses, but we have not been able to work through this resources yet to fund that program. But hopefully we will soon. So, but if there are ideas about things that we can do to help in the community, we're all ears, and we're looking to try and implement those things.
Next question. Will city and county provide reusable masks for low-income communities who may not be able to afford it? Obviously, Mayor can't speak for county, but
So we are, the city of St. Louis is providing masks. In fact, we just got a shipment of 250,000 masks on Friday. Before that, we did not have the capacity. We didn't have the stock. So what we are doing now is through our Meals on Wheels program, through the Housing Authority, through the senior buildings, through a whole number of folks that are connected with us through other programs, we are going to begin to provide masks for those people. We are right now, we're using these surgical masks. I don't know if you all can see this or not, but in addition to that, these cloth masks are really also, frankly, they're a little more comfortable sometimes. They are, and they leave the surgical mask for other people. But yes, we are beginning really this week to distribute masks throughout our other programs. We ask that people, this mask, I've been wearing this mask for a while, several days. I put it in you can put it in a paper bag, like a sandwich bag. When you're done wearing it, just stick it in the sandwich bag. That keeps it clean. And, mine happens to be laying here on my desk, but probably better if I put it in a sandwich bag. We are going to be distributing masks. We know that that's important. I carry masks with me in my purse when I'm out, which frankly isn't that often, but I've been just at the grocery store, but I'll say to someone, hey, do you need a mask? And if they say, yeah, sometimes they scowl at me because they don't want to wear it. But if they need a mask, I just take one out of my purse and hand it to them so they have it. I kind of recommend that we all do, us who are fortunate enough to either have the funds or the access to masks, carry some with you, offer them to people. one of the things that we're going to be hopefully doing is a little social media campaign about it being cool or healthy or fashionable, whatever you want to call it, to wear masks, because the unmaskers are at a higher risk of getting COVID than those of us that are wearing our masks every day. So yes, long answer, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor. I have not heard how the city is working with the St. Louis Public Schools to talk about next school year.
So we, Will Pinkney is the individual in my office who's the director of children, youth, and families. He has been working extensively with not just St. Louis Public Schools, certainly them, all the charter schools, the parochial schools, with weekly or biweekly calls with them about how we can work together. Of course, we all know that the schools are independent of City Hall. They have their own board, so they can make their own decision in compliance with the state Department of Education. But we are them. We are also doing a similar thing with daycare centers, because all of this is all integrated into our community. So we are helping them to play a role in that. And I know schools right now, you can't pick up a newspaper without reading about how schools are struggling to figure out, one, how can they do a better job at online learning, and can they open in August, which would be their normal time. So those decisions aren't made yet, but they certainly are important ones. We're working with them.
Great. A couple more questions before we wrap here. Due to the high cost of opening a restaurant, pub, and bar that has food, I and some others are waiting to see how the end of the stay-at-home affects the infection rate and the likelihood that another stay-at-home order does take effect. If the infections start to increase again, what are the criteria for starting another stay-at-home order, and what is the probability of that happening?
So I think that's to me, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So we will continue to work with the St. Louis Metropolitan Pandemic Task Force. We are continuing to work with Dr. Eccles, who heads up our health department, and with St. Louis County. We're going to make those decisions together. If we just all go out and, party on, it's a higher likelihood that we're going to have another stay-at-home order. I'm just going to say right now, we want to avoid that if at all possible. So I'm asking you all to go slow. I'm asking you to restrain yourself. Don't be close to lots of other people. Don't go out there without your masks, because all of those things increase the likelihood that COVID is going to continue to have a high trajectory of spread, and that will mean that we'll have another stay-at-home order. That we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. So as much as I know that all the businesses want to get open, and I want them open too, I really do. But there's a balancing act here where we have to figure out how to coexist with COVID.
So I'm going to jump in. We have time for maybe one more question, JP. So if you could read one more, and but as we are about to end, I want to thank everyone for participating in this session, and also want to thank all of our panel members for taking time to participate today. And Mayor and Madam License Collector, we certainly appreciate your time as well. So one last question.
Thanks, Otis. One last question. Who is in charge of enforcing these guidelines for businesses, churches, etc.? As of this week, what is the size limit of gatherings? Example, weddings and other gatherings. I believe that one would be for the mayor as well.
Unmute.
Sorry about that. For individuals, the size limit is a 10-person gathering. That applies to a party at your house, a backyard barbecue, etc. For churches and businesses, obviously, there's not a 10-person gathering limit, because if you can open, you're clearly going to have more than 10 people there. There are, for those businesses, there are the social distancing, the masks, the hand washing, those sorts of things. Who's in charge? of enforcing whether or not a business is complying with those guidelines is the health department. It's the health department in the city of St. Louis, the health department in St. Louis County, and the public, frankly. If you walk in somewhere where everybody's crowded up around the bar, turn around and walk back out, obviously. There's a balance here between sort of the government enforcement and what we can do and the individual and what you can do. And we all have a role to play here. And I think it's an important one for all of us to use a bit of common sense here and take COVID seriously. This is a serious thing here. We've got 15% unemployment in the country, probably way higher than that in the city of St. Louis at this point in time. We've got 110,000. Well, I'm not going to quote that number because right now I can't remember it exactly. But we have a lot of deaths. We have a lot of people in the hospital, and we have a lot of people seriously ill. So we have to balance the interests here of what government can do and what individuals need to do.
Okay, with that, we're going to end. We still have about 20 questions on the chat line. Those questions will be answered, and we will we'll provide you with the response. There are a couple of due outs, and we will get the answers about the Department of Labor and unemployment and provide that online as well. So we want to thank everyone again for participating, and we will endeavor to all be safe and follow the guidelines. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.